Hi, welcome to a new episode of Engineering Rebuilt.
Do you think you know a lot about construction?
Maybe we can provide a fresh perspective.
This is a podcast where we rebuild preconceptions of engineering,
Reclaim the narrative,
and share the voices of women from across the construction industry. Why not join us?
Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to our latest episode of the Engineering Rebuild podcast. I'm your host, Tina Gunnarsson, and together with Yvonne Raleigh, today we are joined by Kit Wolverson. So Kit, welcome to our podcast. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to our audience?
Thanks very much, Tina, and thanks, Yvonne, also for having me. So hi, everyone. I'm Kit Wolverson. I'm a civil engineer with almost 5 years postgraduate experience. I work predominantly in consultancy, and I work on rail and bridges projects.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that summary, and really excited to have you on the podcast. Do you want to start by maybe sharing your favorite project from those last 5 years that you've got industry experience of?
Yeah, sure. So my favourite project is probably not directly work related. It's going to be my career highlight for a long time and probably eclipse anything else that I do. But in June, I returned from Rwanda, so I built a bridge with Bridge Prosperity. It was a 78-metre long suspended bridge with a project team of 10 others. So we were 11 people working directly with a community to build a bridge to provide safe access for over 10,500 people. As I said, I'm a bridge engineer by background, so actually building a bridge with our hands without any machinery or tools and actually working alongside the community to provide them that continuous safe access really put the project back into the mind and direct of people. Seeing the joy when they actually walk across the bridge for the first time, children sort of screaming with excitement about running across this bridge. But also the rain that we faced and the challenges of being a different country, different culture, different language is all something that will never be topped by one of my standard projects that I'll get to work on. But everything that I've learnt there will come through in terms of putting people first, thinking about the end user more, thinking about how we can really sort of explain engineering even if you don't speak the language, and really sort of thinking about who it's for and why we do it, why we're solving problems as engineers.
Yeah, there is something special about doing community projects. And wherever you do a community project, it's the nature of it being a community project makes it totally different to let's go and widen this motorway. Oh yeah, okay, that's exciting. But it's not the same, is it? When you've got the whole community buy-in, that just really does change the whole narrative. So how long did it take? I mean, there in June, but how long were you there for?
So it's a 2-week build. So we were on site for 11 days. Some of the community do some of the pre-work. So they prepare the abutments and prepare the site because that needs more time for the concrete to cure and all those kind of fun stuff. But we were there for the full deck launch, trying to try new technologies in terms of producing working at height, using our sort of innovative ideas to launch the deck, to teach the community how to install and maintain these panels. So it was 11-day full-on building out there, all accumulating in a big inauguration ceremony with the community explaining the benefits that it will bring. And then thankfully we also got to spend a week out in country exploring afterwards. So actually making the most of what Rwanda has to offer and all the different things that are there. And so many of us hadn't been to Africa before. So it's that different sort of culture and seeing how they do things and seeing why these bridges are so necessary.
Yeah. I don't think, unless you've worked in Africa, I think it's really hard to understand the difference that what seems to be a really small project for like a UK based consultancy or a construction company makes a massive difference to the local communities in Africa. Yeah, no, it's super cool. So you chose consultancy. Why did you choose? I mean, I've been a contractor 30 years. I know contracting inside out. I've done work in consultancies. I've done my design placements and bits and pieces, and I've worked on lots of design and build projects with consultancies. But why did you choose consultancy over contracting?
So I had a bit of a negative experience on site. Tried to make the most of every sort of summer placement that you could do at university, to see the client side, to see the contracting office side of pre-construction and doing life for bid. And then I got the opportunity to go on site for an 8-week summer placement, where I was maybe the only female on their own on site out of a site of 1,000 people. I was just going around sort of surveying trusses, checking rebar and pile caps, simple tasks for a summer intern or summer placement student. But everywhere I went, I felt all eyes were on me. I was told, oh, she's the busy one, or look busy, the bossy one's back. Everyone was questioning everything I said, more so than peers who were similar age but were male. And I sort of concluded that final summer placement and site placement with, I don't mind proving my age, but I don't want to prove my gender when I start off in the industry. I want to build my confidence, go into the sort of what felt like a safer office environment, to build my experience, to build my design knowledge, that I could then go on site and know design inside out, that should anyone question me, I've got the confidence to be like, no, this is correct, I've designed it, and be able to sort of rebut that. But it was just that feeling of everyone staring at you, looking at you, questioning you. And I raised it, and someone made the comment of, oh, that's just the way it is at the moment. And that was sort of the final, no, do you know what, I'm going to step away from this here until I can see things are change, or I'm ready at a position in my career that I could go back out on site full time. And I've gone out since. I've gone out on like site visits and inspections, but not for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I started in the industry as I was fortunate. On the first site I was on, there was 2 of us, but the other engineer that was female was much more experienced than I was, and was clearly good friends with the project director, and so was protected in that way. And I didn't do my summer placement work. I didn't do on site. I worked in the office. I did all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, when I got on site, it was a massive shock. And I mean, we know from the surveys that have been done that 50% of women leave in the first year of being in the industry. And I think that a lot of that is because they've got no experience of being on site. And when you get on site and you are the only woman there, it can be absolutely terrifying. I mean, I'm talking to a really, really experienced project manager who's come into construction from another industry last week. We were catching up, and we're connected on LinkedIn. We were catching up and having a conversation, and she said she felt completely undermined by the way that the men all spoke about her. And she's an experienced project manager. She's delivered multi-million-pound projects in other industries. It's just that in the construction industry, she's seen as this woman who's bossy, and we need to get past the point where all the men are really insecure. Because it's not a problem. It's not our problem. We are not bossy. I mean, if a man said what we said, he'd be seen to be assertive. So consultancy work suits you. You're loving it. You're doing all sorts of interesting stuff. And railways, that's a specialisation.
Yeah, so railways and bridges. I think the sort of time in Rwanda and being on site and being really hands-on has sort of changed my perspective that potentially I could end up in contracting in the future, just actually delivering a project. I've done a few bridge schemes, a few sort of flood schemes, so back to helping people and seeing direct impacts. And then I've worked on Northern Powerhouse Rail as the sort of design manager and coordination, and also as a sort of civil engineer assessing clearances of bridges for overhead line equipment, and now I'm on HS2 as a designer. So a real sort of mix of smaller projects and bigger projects, but I see my future in sort of the coordination, so bringing people together with a technical background but delivering, because that's where I love a plan, I love an organisation, I love a tick box, all the sort of traits that people associate with women, and so you end up doing all the extra committees and all the extracurricular bits too, but actually taking that and channeling that into my work. I like the idea of being a design manager or a coordinator in the future.
So could you tell us a bit more about how working at B2P in Rwanda changed your perspective on engineering and maybe the impact on your personal life?
The project with British Prosperity changed my perspective really generally about engineering in terms of putting people first, thinking about the end user, thinking about who your project's backed for. I know we sort of try and think of who our client or end user is, but seeing it directly, building alongside the community, but also seeing the joy at the end of the build, really put that back into perspective, thinking about you're connecting from one valley to another, serving over 6 communities and such a vast number of people, really sort of put that into perspective with engineering. And then in a personal life, I don't think I've fully digested it and processed it, having got back what still feels like so recently, but just the importance of something that seems so simple to us in our daily lives, the connection of a bridge. Someone that was on our team with us, he lost his father to the river that we were spanning 10 years ago, and it was sort of that personal tie of imagine if you lost your father to the river and they're just going about their daily lives, and it was just something that we can do and support and build really help someone in their daily lives. That bridge now provides access to the local hospital, the local market for them to sell their produce as farmers, for schools. So there was a school either side of the valley, but different kids would go to different ones depending on what they were interested in. So it was that simple thing. And one of the people we asked said, oh, my sister lives on the other side of the valley, so at the moment it takes me about an hour or an hour and a half to walk there, and with this bridge it becomes more like 40 minutes. And it's still a long walk, but that's a massive saving for her to go and visit her sister. It's those things that we just take for granted because we can hop on a train or the tram or whichever. It's bringing it back into perspective that we have the power to change that and shape that as engineers, and we really can problem solve and directly help people. So it's that realization that it's not just let's do this calculation or let's send this off or get this approved or check this, and it's really the direct impact and seeing that and just seeing the reaction and how grateful every single person that we met was, the singing, the joy, everything that comes from it. You can really do that with engineering, and it's fantastic. And I'm just so happy that I got to be part of that, and I'm still shouting about it, and I'll be championing it for a long time because it's such a highlight and such an amazing thing to be part of.
I think that's completely fair. I mean, you've only just got back. I went out in 2018, and I still think about a lot of the things that happened out there, a lot of the impact. Like, it had a real big impact on me, and it was just a very, very real project. Do you want to share some of your highlights and some of your lowlights of the project?
I'm kind of jealous of the pair of you on the basis that I never got to do something like that in my early career. It seems like it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, just absolutely fantastic. So in terms of the real highlights, building a bridge as a bridge engineer, I'm never going to build a bridge myself unless in that opportunity. Seeing the community walk across it, obviously that would naturally be a highlight. One of the biggest ones was actually I was on harness on the deck with 2 members of the community. So we trained up one of them, me and myself and another team member, and then one of the other team members of the community joined us. So I was with Obed and Joseph, who are 2 fantastic, hardworking local people, and we taught them how to lay deck panels, and then they form part of the bridge maintenance community committee going forwards, but through very simple, this goes here, with a bit of Kinyarwanda, so me saying yes or no, like yego, or if something became unsafe, I'd be like akigara, which is stop, but I could explain with very big hand gestures, and having trained one person up, he was able to help train the next. We were laying deck panels, the 3 of us. It was such a highlight to be able to explain and protect the future and the maintenance of it. And then I guess in terms of lows, a project like that, it's hard. It's hard. It's easy to just celebrate the highs, but there were lows in terms of the weather. We were very, very far west from the capital city. Rwanda has 2 rainy seasons, and we were at the tail end of one, which obviously puts program issues, but it also makes it very slippy. We were in a valley. Our bridge was 78 meters, but we were in such a valley that it was quite a walk down to the site each day, so down on the way there and up on the way back. and as soon as it rained, you were slipping, sliding everywhere. So I fell over on the first day, as did some of my team members, and it was just, you'd waited to go and you thought you were very prepared, and you can't really prepare yourself for that sort of experience until you get there, really. So that was one of the lows. And then just long days. I think you underestimate how long it is until you're actually on site. And I think, not being a site engineer, I was more accustomed to being in the office and even trying to prepare myself and learn from others. There's still those different things to see and sort of hard labour to do as well.
So how do you think we could give people, like Yvonne, like not everyone has this opportunity to go out to Africa, right?
So we could give others sort of an opportunity to experience something similar by sort of shouting about what we do, sharing experiences. We had a very unfortunate toilet situation in Rwanda, so it was a pit latrine, and I thought I knew pit latrines because I did a dissertation on one. It was about the sort of flooding impacts of pit latrines in Uganda. So I got flood monitoring systems, and I'd assess different types of pit latrines and where they're used in the really poor areas to what's just the poor areas. And I was like, right, I'll be fine. I'll know what pit latrines are. And actually, it was the worst thing I'd ever experienced. There was sort of a fear to go in there. There were 3 cockroaches that were in the pit latrine. And actually, we had a bit of a research of what a bad toilet was in terms of WaterAid's definition. And our toilet was much worse than what was shown as a WaterAid bad toilet. So all of our team thought that we would come back and sort of explain what we'd been through, and also support WaterAid going forwards, just in terms of the work that they do, because we also had a tap that was just the whole community tap. So things like that, which you might see as a news, but until you've experienced it or you've heard of someone else that's experienced it, you can't make those same comparisons. And as engineers, we are responsible potentially for the water that comes through someone's pipe. So it directly ties back to that we can be supporting and challenging and raising awareness of what it is like. It's not just the image that you see in the news or that you see in a textbook. People are going through that. And so obviously when you're in country, you don't want to be shouting about, this isn't great. If someone overhears you, this is what they're used to. But what we can do is showcase in terms of, this is what we experienced, let's support it, and really championing it going forwards and help people like that. I think they're used to it, but that doesn't mean that we can't better it and can't improve things and give them more access to safe water systems and sanitation. It will just improve the sort of health and the well-being that they have. And things like more toilets, so they're less used, they're spaced out, and just really sort of improve the situation. So in terms of giving other people the chance to be impactful, it's bringing it back, explaining why it's useful to people, but then also giving them the opportunity and the methods to support and help others too.
Everything I've done in the UK in terms of construction. I mean, that's not actually true. I've worked in a number of different locations, but I've worked in developed countries rather than developing countries. A lot of the tender stuff we do is developing countries. And Tina and I talked on a previous podcast about the fact we can get in early. And when we're doing tendering, we can make a difference by making provision in the tender for creation of community facilities and things like that. So when we're working in Uganda, we do quite a lot of tendering for companies in Uganda. And you look at the national plan for Uganda and you say, okay, well, this is what the minimum requirement is, but how can we make the most of that for the communities that this project is going to interface with? And how can we actually bring the maximum benefit to that community? And it's not just putting a water pipe in the middle of the village and digging them a toilet. It's all the extra bits. It's how does the hospital interact with that water supply, and how do we tie all those things together? So I think there's a responsibility, certainly with international contractors and consultancies, to look much harder at what we're specifying and what we're providing when we're really at the early stages of projects, because it's all well and good thinking about the infrastructure, but it's not actually thinking about the people. I mean, we've looked at airports in Uganda, airports in Tanzania, and there's a requirement for you to provide X, Y, Z. The client's giving you a list. But how does that actually link to the local community? Is that what the local community needs? Is that how does that work for them? So yeah, I definitely, there's impact to be made before we even get on the ground. I mean, schemes like yours and like where we send engineers in to do one-off small projects, actually the amount of international contracting that's going on, the amount of money that's being spent in these countries on major projects, there should really be no need for this kind of project to be done. We should be including all of this kind of infrastructure into the big international projects. So if you're doing a £1 billion rail project across Africa, then I'm terribly sorry, but you should be putting community provision along the whole of that route and probably a 50-mile wide radius of either side of where you're working, because that's the responsible thing to do. And I think there's a real lack of responsibility, certainly within developing countries. There's a lot of big spend that's not bringing that kind of responsibility with it. There you go. It's me on my soapbox again.
I agree. I think lots of companies are saying CSR or social value, and if they're doing this big rail scheme, for example, across Africa for a sort of scenario, then that would probably count as a CSR or social value tick box because it's in a developing country. But it's doing A to B, but what about all those peripheral towns, as you've mentioned, and what about all those people that would get way more? And yes, they might get a few more jobs that come out of the railway, and there might be a few tangible outcomes in that sense, but there is so much more that they could do. And if they happen to be right by X or Y community, them spending a month or less, even if they're putting in something like a pipeline or a new toilet as part of their scheme, like every community we pass will put some more toilets or more provision. It seems far-fetched and ridiculous, but they're already there with their infrastructure and their teams in country, so it's something small in their project, but to the community effective, that's huge.
Yeah.
And we can really sort of shape that if as engineers.
Absolutely. And I mean, some of these communities with these big projects, the communities are just pushed either side of the project. I mean, you put a railway through the middle of Africa, you split communities that have been together for hundreds of years. And you say, oh, well, we've paid them this amount of money or whatever it is that the government have paid them to push them to one side and put them on different bits of land. But the impact is really large. And then you run the project through and you wonder why there's this negative feeling from the communities. But actually, you've destroyed their livelihoods by not putting in place really integrated community support. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got a long way to go, but at least we've got people like you interested in doing it right.
Hopefully, I can shout more about it and get the word out there.
And that's all we can do. I mean, with everything, it's about being vocal. I guess the next question leads on from this one, which is we ask all our guests this one. In the next 5 years, where do you see the industry going? What do you see changing in the industry in the next 5 years?
I'd love to say, there'll be X number % more women in the industry, and that we won't have to still be shouting about getting more women into the industry, but we're still going to be doing that in 5 years' time, unfortunately. And I hope I won't get the reaction of if I say to a taxi driver that I'm a civil engineer, they go, oh, is that a man's job? I hope that's still not something that we're battling with. I hope we can have more of a physical and a vocal presence, that we're seen as sort of counterparts in terms of everyone, that it's not just in our industry that someone looks and goes, yeah, she can be a civil engineer, there's no issue there. But in terms of what we're doing, I hope we're taking sustainability more into the forefront of our projects. It's still become a tick box exercise, but I want it to be something that you're doing a project, you run a carbon calculation like you run a bending check when you're looking at a beam. Why would we not? It's so easy to do now. It's almost automated. We should be doing that naturally. That everyone in work sort of goes and does a STEM activity, or goes and speaks at a school and maybe says, and yes, you'll get the people that are really sort of socially awkward and don't want to do it, but actually they could go if someone's a bit more confident and they might love it. They might absolutely showcase what they do, because everyone can speak about themselves for 5 minutes and explain what they're working on. but that might inspire someone that's really shy, that doesn't think they're right, or it might actually go, someone goes, oh, I don't want to do engineering, but I'm really glad I met that person or that person that works in construction. I think if everyone did something small, it would have such a massive effect. It doesn't always need to be the people that are the most vocal, because naturally if you've had something happen to you or a negative experience, or because you've had to work or what seems like harder, you will push and bring other people up with you and bring them along, because you want to be inclusive, you want to bring people with you. But those that maybe have fallen into the industry or it seemed easier, if they can also champion it, then we'll be in a much better position of people just understanding what we do. And in 5 years' time, that could be massive.
So I think those are some really, really wise words. But I would like to finish on bridges. Like, what is it about bridges that makes us love them, both as people and as engineers? What is it that has attracted you to steer your career towards bridges? Do you have a favorite bridge aside from the one you've just built?
So I think everyone loves a bridge because they look really cool. They connect people. As engineers, we want to problem solve, and I think bridges give us that most direct thing of connecting people from A to B. But they also look architecturally interesting, that people can say, oh, that's really beautiful. Or you can be like, oh, I visited this bridge and you've crossed it, and it's different. I'm a really big fan of a bridge selfie. It's just something I do wherever I go. My friends, if they're on holiday, will take a picture of a bridge selfie and send it to me and just be like, what do you think of this bridge? Rate it out of 10. There's been some really interesting ones, some niche ones, some bigger ones. My friend went on holiday to the Malau Viaduct, which is my favourite bridge, and she brought me back a glittery pink Malau Viaduct mug, which is my mug in the office, and I absolutely love it. So I've got friends that will just send me pictures of bridges all the time, and it's great. And maybe that makes me want to work on the biggest bridges, and when you get a highway bridge, it's like, oh, maybe that's not as cool, but you're still connecting people and you're still providing people that connection. So it's bringing it back to how it's important. So favourite bridge absolutely is the Malau Viaduct. Golden Gate probably is a close second, which I did a year abroad in Canada and got to travel around America afterwards, so I got to drive across it and see it in person and really sort of see it at sunset. So it's those big bridges, but then also there's a small one where I grew up in London, which is a swing bridge, and I just love it for how practical it is, how it provides that connection. It's quite pretty, just that it's simple, it's asymmetric, it's in Deptford, it's a Deptford swing bridge, and it allows boats to still pass. It opens, it connects to the wall, and it's nice, but then it opens again and to allow people across it, and it's for pedestrians and cyclists, and it really connects two pieces of land that if not, it's a 15-minute detour if it's not open. So it's got tangible outcomes again, taking it back to the bridge we built in Rwanda, but it's simple and effective, and it still allows boats to pass when the changes of the Thames are high or low tide. So it doesn't need to be those big grand bridges that everyone loves and wants to take their bridge selfie with, but if we are connecting people and providing those outcomes, then it's a real sort of great place to be and a great place to be part of. Something that we can really change and shape and get young people excited about bridges. So I think bridges are the future.
Oh, I love bridges. I mean, you grew up then, where I designed Deptford Viaduct for DLR. So yeah, that's part of my design experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. I got the DLR to one of my first work experiences, which wasn't engineering, but still gave me a taste of sort of industry, and that was just in like the old Docklands. So I just would sit on the DLR, and it was always quite weird that there wasn't a driver, but it was still quite exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, I was quite lucky. I did the A2M2 Medway crossing. I did the caisson design for that, the temporary works design for the A2M2 Medway crossing, and yeah, there is definitely something about the bridge. I've worked on Spaghetti Junction, refurbing Spaghetti Junction. Bridges are very, very cool. And that seems like an absolutely amazing place to leave. This has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Hopefully people really enjoy listening, and we will see them again on the next Engineering Rebuilt podcast. So thanks very much, Kit.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Engineering Rebuilt. We hope you enjoyed being part of the conversation. Please join us next time to hear more diverse stories from people who are reclaiming their narrative to rebuild engineering.